and another chance to listen to as an Actor Worship Ministries radio show with your host, Ann Wooten Taylor. Good morning, my dear friend.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you, William?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. A little chilly out here. I won't be.
Little.
I will. Yes.
It's
Yeah.
really chilly here.
Oh my God. I woke up yesterday. It was 20 degrees. And let's see. Today, where are we right now? Oh, it's a balmy 37. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Oh boy. Oh boy. California. Oh boy.
you
Look
miss
at
it, don't you? I bet you miss the
that.
California quite a bit right about now. Yeah.
I have to confess. Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely, absolutely. Especially this time of the year. Virginia is beautiful during the spring and the fall, and it gets a little warmer in the summer. Okay, but it's bearable, right? But winters, I didn't get a little rough, but that's okay.
oh.
Oh yeah, okay, okay. I can
You
I can
just
just feel
spoiled.
that fake sympathy. I could feel it. Okay.
Well, look, it's been cold here too. I mean, yesterday you could see a thin layer of ice over the lake in the backyard, and once it got warm enough for the temperatures to increase, it was you could see the part of the lake start to move again, like around the edges, but the middle was still frozen. So
Uh-huh.
it's been cold. As a matter of fact, it we had the ice storm come through Tuesday. We still have ice in front of our house and surrounding the cars. It's crazy.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, we had a snowstorm this weekend, but that's all melted now. But anyway, it's still cold. Anyway, your guest, he's buffering a little bit. I think he's having a little technical problem there.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's on site at his next appointment, which is after today's show. I mean after our show. So he's pretty booked up today. But it's one of your favorite people, Mr. Earl Mitchell is back with us. You
oh,
probably
absolutely, absolutely, no question about it. Wow, wow, yeah, we have to have Earl back. Haven't spoken to Earl in a while.
Yeah, it's been a minute since he's been on, but it's Black History Month, so who better to have to talk to us about Black History Month, and how important it is at this day, at this age, for such a time as this, as the Bible would put it. So that's what we will be talking about today: the importance of Black history, especially in our current political environment. And we're going to have Mr. Earl Mitchell grace us with his presence and give us his knowledge, as he has done so, eloquently in the past.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Mr. Mitchell, okay, there he is.
Still
Mr.
buffering.
Mitchell,
Oh,
how
okay.
are you, sir?
Hey, can you hear us? How are you doing? Can you hear us, Mr. Mitchell? Hello.
I
Uh,
don't think he can. He's having, like I said, some terrible technical problems here. We'll get it going. But speaking of Black history, not sure whether you had a chance to hear it or not, but we do a show, a new show. It's a year in its making. Was just next week, or this coming Tuesday, rather, it will be our 53rd episode of this program I created, like I said, a little over a year ago, called Groove Swing Speaks.
yeah.
And we talk about Black history. I open up the segment each week with some Black history facts and
Mhm.
sort of link it to whether it's medicine. Then I go back into Black history, our medical pioneers. Okay, there was in medicine,
Awesome.
whether it's in business, whether it's in literature,
Mm,
whether it's in health, whatever it is.
mhm.
That's what we talk about. So I'm sure you and Mr. Mitchell is going to have a fascinating conversation today. Now, Mr.
Yeah.
Mitchell, are you? Can you hear us now? Okay. He can't hear us for some strange reason. Well,
Mm.
the internet is tricky. This depends on where you are.
We
Uh,
can't hear you. I don't know. I see your lips moving, but we can't hear you. Can you hear us? You can hear us, but we can't hear you. I'm looking at your lips move. That's how I but no, we can't hear a word you're saying. Um can you log out and come back in for us? That might help. Just log out and come back in.
perhaps that will. Perhaps
Yeah.
that will.
If
Yeah.
you can if you can hear us, log out and come back in.
You know, okay. While he's doing taking care of that, over the last several weeks, we've talked about a lot of our heroes. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, let's see, whether it's uh, McCoy. What's his first name? The
A
one that
real Elijah McCoy.
Elijah McCoy, the real McCoy. We
Yeah.
talked about him. We talked about Betsy Coleman, the first black female pilot that couldn't get a
Awesome.
license here in the
Had
United
to go
States.
to
She had to go to
France.
France. She
Mhm.
did, absolutely. She had to go to France to get her license there. We talk about Charles Drew,
Mhm.
with the blood plasma. Uh,
Mhm.
and there's so many. We can go on and on and on. Pick a subject, and you'll find us there. And
Right.
in most cases, you find that it was the black person who has made life better for the world.
Mhm.
So that's why when some of these people start talking about DEI, ah, I get flustered in a lot of ways. But I'm trying to learn patience because I'm saying if I'm yelling and screaming, nobody can hear me, right? So
Wow.
I try to present facts, and so many of these uh, let's see, diversity of people, let's put it that way. You know,
Mhm.
they
Mhm.
will, well, yeah, because of this, well, no, that's fake, and they will not listen to the truth. And I think that what it is, they know that it's true, okay? But if they admit that it is, that they have to uh, admit that we're right all the time. And to me, when you start talking about DEI, it
Mhm.
means that you're picking the best person.
Mm.
How
Well,
could you not interview everyone? There are smart people in
that's
every
true.
race. So this DEI stuff, I mean, it just makes um, my okay. There is Mr. Mitchell. Let's see if he can hear us now.
Yep,
Mr.
I hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Oh,
hear you. We hear
absolutely.
you. Awesome. Awesome.
Oh
Glad
man,
to
technical glitches all the time in life, but what can I tell you? It's good to see
Hey,
you.
it's
oh,
good to see you too. It's good to see you too. And William, let me just encourage you a little bit. I know it looks bad. I know it feels bad. And that's because it is bad.
uh,
but at the same time, we must acknowledge, the presence and the hand of God in everything. If it's happening, it's because He allowed it to happen, and you have to understand that when we read, the Word, this is like the first time around when the Lord had me tell y'all that these people are asking for a king,
mm,
and and God, the first time that we read about this in the Bible, God gave the people Saul. Look, I think some folks will probably take Saul over what we got any day of the week. but at the same time, you have to understand that God allows their hearts to be hardened. And so you've got the hardening of their hearts, and it's the Lord is allowing that, and there's nothing that you can do about it when it's a move of God, except of course to be prayerful, ask to make it through this season, ask for God of course turn it around and make things right.
mm,
That's what we, and not only that, what you do every week, and that is to endeavor to put the truth out there and to combat all the disinformation and the lies, and basically it's just fear. At the end of the day, there are a bunch of people who are afraid and they're using their fear as an excuse to basically dehumanize other folks.
mm.
And it's sad. But it's just the way that it is. And
Mm.
we're gonna talk to Mr. Mitchell
Yes,
a
and I
lot
want to
about
say this.
a lot about what he thinks on this subject in a moment. But before we get to that, I've got to tell you guys your motivation for this week, especially since you didn't get one last week.
Okay.
Your motivation that we do is designed to encourage you to stay the course. If you've been doing well on your health and fitness journey, we want to inspire you to get up and try again. If you fell down somewhere, along the way. And if you haven't been able to get motivated to take charge of your health and fitness, we want to motivate you today through Jesus Christ. So today's motivation is entitled, Are You Willing to Work? One of the biggest hurdles to starting a new health and fitness plan is the fact that you have to do some work. Truthfully speaking, many people don't lose weight or experience sustained freedom from eating disorders because they just don't want to do the work. You probably will not have to look beyond your own life experiences to know this is true. More than likely, you successfully lost weight on at least one diet plan during your weight loss journey. I'm sure you can clearly recall that time that you gave it all your, everything you had, and you lost maybe 30 pounds or more of weight. Likewise, those who seek treatment for eating disorders have probably experienced success when they follow the treatment plan of their providers. Those moments stick with you because you're still proud of what you accomplished back then, and because you remember what it cost you to achieve those results. For example, you probably had to get up at 4 a.m. in order to work out before getting yourself and your family ready for school and work. You may have paid hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to participate in a weight loss program that required you to, pay membership fees and purchase products. Likewise, you can recall the extra time and effort it took to prepare all of your own meals instead of eating out. Those suffering from eating disorders may have endured a combination of therapy, nutrition education, medical visits, and medication management in order to manage symptoms and return to a healthy body weight. Just like the feeling of accomplishment sticks with you, so do the negative emotions associated with what you went through to lose the weight or control the eating disorder. Those negative thoughts tend to overshadow the good ones. Consequently, you come up with various excuses, if not an outright honest refusal to try again. I can't and I won't lie to you by saying you won't have to do the work when you start to eat and drink for the glory of God in accordance to his word. On the contrary, the Lord makes it very clear in scripture that you will have to fight for the promised land of healthy and fit for life. What is equally clear is that this time you won't be fighting in your own strength. When you choose obedience to God over your own carnal desires, God performs a miracle in your life by empowering you to finally and permanently defeat the giants of obesity and eating disorders. So, if you're willing to do the work required to become healthy and fit through Christ, purchase your copies of the Eating as an Act of Worship workbook and the Eating as an Act of Worship Teachers Edition online today at Amazon or barnesandnoble.com. In the books, you'll learn the biblical principles about the body, dieting, exercising, and maintaining a healthy body for the glory of God. Don't forget to read our blog for motivation to stay healthy and fit through Christ, and follow us daily on Facebook, Threads, LinkedIn, and Pinterest for recipes and diet and exercise tips. And tune in to our syndicated radio show on iTunes, Spotify, Studio W Buzz, and Victory, KVDW 100.9 FM, 95.3 FM, and 1530 AM in Little Rock, Arkansas for interviews and health and fitness trends. Lastly, please make your tax-deductible donation to Eating as an Act of Worship Ministries at www.eatingasanactofworshipministries.org. In the upper right hand corner on the home page, you'll be able to click the donate button and make your tax deductible donation. And we say thank you for your generosity in advance. All right, everybody. We have one of our favorite guests who's back with us again. It's been a minute since he's been on the air, but Mr. Earl C. Mitchell III is back with us. He's an accomplished mentor and scholar of African and African American studies with deep experience in the development of collegiate level mentorship programs that promote cultural identity and understanding. Mr. Mitchell was born in the Bronx, New York. He received his elementary through high school education in New York and later relocated to Atlanta, Georgia, where he completed his Bachelor of Arts degree from Morehouse College. He has also completed a master's program in African American Studies at Clark Atlanta University. He and his family live in New York and enjoy traveling. Mr. Mitchell has traveled across the globe and documented his findings on African and African American history. His trips throughout Africa, Europe, the Americas, and the Caribbean islands have served as the backdrop for his research. Welcome to the show, my friend. It's good to have you back.
It is good to be back. It is good to be here. It's good to see you. And what a day it is, right? What a day.
Right. I was telling William you are so busy today. He's booked up on this particular day, so we are blessed to have you to grace us with some of your time, your presence, and of course your knowledge and experience and expertise. We really appreciate having you here. Um, we William, as you can see, is already had his buttons pushed, but in this on this last Saturday in February, Black History Month, um, I wanted to discuss something that I think is very important for such a time as this, and that is the importance of Black history. And you, as a scholar of African and African American studies, you um you have this saying, that it's your estimation that knowledge of self leads to greater self-awareness with when predicated upon a true understanding of one's culture.
Ooh,
Yeah, unpack that for us a little bit, because it sounds to me like that's what we're going to be talking about in a nutshell here today.
indeed, definitely. Let me take my glasses off.
Okay.
First and foremost, I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you and speak to your listeners and to give perspective, about what Black history means, about what's going on in today's society as it relates to Black history, and
Mhm.
where we simply find ourselves, if you will. And I think it's important to recognize that culture will always be a barometer about where not only an individual is, but where the culture happens to be. And
Mhm.
more specifically, you have, many today saying, the culture, but not necessarily speaking specifically to what culture. Are we talking about hip hop culture? We're talking about African culture. We're talking about European culture. We have to be specific about what's being said. And
Mhm.
elastic perspective, it's very important to be specific. So from the outset, I would like to say that this conversation today would definitively be predicated upon the African American history, the African diaspora, world history of which African history is a part of, and which African American history and Black history is a part of. And
Amen.
it's very important to always remember that. But as a foundational comment, I would like to speak before I can even begin. I have to give respect and honor to Carter G. Woodson, who was the one that created Negro History Week, uh,
Mhm.
1926, and it is his mind and it was his estimation that it was important to study African and African American history, dealing with the African diaspora, if you will.
Mhm.
He was one of the first African American scholars to actually focus on that level of specificity as it pertained to culture in general, and more specifically, African culture.
Mhm.
And it's really important to understand, I mean, and to the fact that he had the temerity to say, back in 1926, that we need a Negro History Week, which
Right.
literally in that space and place, we understand what 1926 would have represented to people of African descent in America. And
Mhm.
temerity to make something that was and create something that still resonates till this day, and even more so now than ever. Uh,
Right.
just a cursory remark in terms of the foundation of what this conversation is going to be about, and then where we're going to kind of move forward from, if you will.
Mhm. Look, as usual, I wish AJ was in here to listen to you. This is one of those hang on your every word moments. Um, you mentioned that Carter G. Woodson founded what we now know to be Black History Month. It started out as a week. When did it change from just a week to the whole month of February?
Interesting. I don't remember when it actually changed, and that would be within the last, let's say, 30 years, if you will, if not more. But it hasn't been that long. I mean, if you think about, uh, number one, and I'm just going to go back really briefly to Carter G. Woodson. He was
Mhm.
the second person who graduated from Harvard with a PhD.
Wow. That's
And
amazing.
the first one was W.E.B. Du Bois, so he, was in good
Wow.
company. Well, but
Right.
specific to Carter G. Woodson, he is the only person who has received a PhD who was born from enslaved parents. And I think
Mhm.
something to really understand in terms of the importance of education
Mhm.
and what that education and again, what the temerity of his mind as it relates to culture really represented.
Mhm.
Uh, when you talk about when Black History, when did it start? When did it go from Negro History Week to Black History Month? I don't want to tell on my age. It's always been, but
Look, it's better to be on top of the ground than underneath it. So
I
praise the Lord for every year.
agree. So I will say, I know at least in 1967, we had Black History Month going on. But then if we go back to the 60s, we have to also recognize that there really weren't any Black studies courses and that was a major fight, particularly uh, I don't want to say towards the tail end of the civil rights slash Black Power movement, but this is what some of the fight happened to be about: more information and education about people of African descent in terms of what was taking place in the schools. Now,
Mhm.
this is important because when we look at that moment in time, the fight for the number one, the respect to even be thought about as a subject to be engaged, that's very important because again, we're looking at all other cultures. We're looking at European culture, we're looking at Asian culture, just
Mhm.
across the board. And of course, standing in the pantheon of history, if you will, the Greco-Roman thought process and dealing with the essence of what one would consider and call the classics.
Mhm.
Not that there's anything the matter with that. However, for and because of the exclusion of people of African descent and engaging the essence of the African diaspora, it was needed for this thought process and these ideas to come into the educational milieu. Now, when we're looking at the late 60s, early 70s,
Mhm.
there was major pushback. I mean, even with many of your historically Black colleges and universities didn't necessarily want to engage, this level of intellectual cultural understanding, and not that it wasn't appreciated. It's just that in that moment in time, it was taking time for the idea of the word Africa or the essence of African. Because remember, we were Negroes and called other words.
Mhm.
We but when you look at other folks, when they would say, "Let's," I'm Italian, or I am, Danish, or what have you, that they were always able to connect to the land base. And as a
Mhm.
Black person, that doesn't denote a land connection. But when we say African American, we recognize from whence we've come. Now, the difference is, and I don't mean to be all over the place, but the difference with African Americans is the fact that many of us do not know specifically where we come from, where many
Right.
other cultures and other peoples can definitively say we come from this particular country, we come from this particular village, and
Mhm.
we family, or at least we know the space to go so that we can engage. Uh,
Mhm.
Due to the transatlantic slave trade, or what is more properly called the Ma'afa, that was disconnected for many of us, and that has been a
Mhm.
fight for us to really reclaim a level of history, to reclaim a sense of self, and to quite honestly reclaim the idea of many of the lands that in many instances might be considered the Middle East, like Egypt, if you will. So Egypt was in many instances taken up out of the idea of Africa. And
Mhm.
that fight trying to get Black studies programs within the collegiate arena was to have the conversation to put Egypt back within the cradle of Africa, if you will, so that one would understand that it was people of African descent that actually built the pyramids, along
Mhm.
with other wonderful things that were made, kind of like the golf tee was made by African descent, or the stoplight
Wow.
made by
Wow.
African descent. So,
Wow.
in
The
terms
stock market. Let that sink in, folks.
of when you talk about where African people were sold down by the Wall Street area, and that's one of the reasons why they call it Wall Street, because we were sold at the wall. But again, you have to
Wow.
get into the history to understand it. And as a matter of fact, there is an African American remembrance, because they were digging probably about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and they
Mm.
were going to put up a new building down in Wall Street, and they came upon some unmarked graves
Wow.
where the
Wow.
of God knows how many people of African descent.
Wow. Wow.
So I mean, we've just kind of flew through like a whole bunch of history right now. But
We did. And
I,
you mentioned going, the people knowing where they come from and being able to point to that. I remember in college, going to Senegal and going to Gambia and it feeling like going home.
mhm,
Um, and then, meeting people who can look at you and tell you that you look like this group of people from this part of Africa or that group of people from another part of Africa. Um and it did give you a sense of connection. It did make make you feel like, wow, it's it's a really good chance that my people came from Senegal. Simply because you're listening to people who know each other so well that they can tell by bone structure. They can tell by, body, the way that you're built, what tribe or what area that you probably have ancestry in. And so for me, what it sounds like, and it feels like knowing where you come from, having a sense of your own cultural history plays a big part, not just, in your um well-being, but your mental health. It
oh,
sounds to me like this is actually a mental and emotional health issue.
you just hit on so much right there in terms of being in Senegal and having
Mhm.
many of the people from Senegal look at you and say that you look like you might be from the Fulani or
Mhm. Mhm.
you will. I think it's important to you talk about knowledge of self and mental health.
Mhm.
There's an old adage that says, when you tell a fish to climb a tree, and if he doesn't make it to the top, he's considered a failure because he doesn't realize that he doesn't belong trying to climb a tree. He belongs in the ocean.
Mm.
And I think for people of African descent, not to engage the essence of who you are, in many instances, it can bring about a level of mental health. And in many instances, we see that played out. Now,
Mhm.
what does that mean and how is that actually played out? And who am I to even say to someone that you are forgetting from whence you've come? We have
Mm.
choices to make, if you will. However, when we talk about color and we talk about these issues of racism, so to speak, which are social constructs,
Mhm.
essence of ethnicity, when you start talking about place and space, this is something that's totally different. And when you step away from the core of who you are, it is
Mhm.
disavowing your mother and disavowing your father. And if
Mm.
you not embrace from whence you've come, essentially you are placed in a moment and placed in a space where you're being socialized within a reality that was not yours initially. Now,
Mhm.
what does that actually mean? Well, what I'm saying is, if you are a man or a woman, a person of African descent born in America, and you're only told that the essence of your history starts with the enslavement of your people, then you've been cut off from the fullness of a 10, 15, 20, 1 million year ancestry that is your birthright. And someone else
Right.
dictating to you how you are supposed to see and understand yourself, which is not right and proper. Now, how does that actually play itself out today? Well,
Mhm.
talking about, and I heard briefly about diversity, equity, and inclusion. In terms
Mhm.
of diversity, being
Mhm.
diverse cultures, not just people of African descent, but diverse thoughts, backgrounds, educations, and so forth, because it's not just about ethnicity.
Right.
The essence of the diversity, the equity, the equalness, the equanimity of all cultures in terms of being a American or an American citizen, all rights appertaining thereto, and so forth.
Mhm.
That we're supposed to have, and of course, the inclusion aspect, which means everyone in this country is supposed to be included based upon the Constitution, all the good stuff that we are taught.
Exactly.
However, now that we have books that are being burned, books by Alice Walker,
Mhm. Mhm.
why the caged bird sings. And these are ideas and thought processes coming from women of African descent who knew, know, understood, and was
Mhm.
forth not just a thought but truth, to make sure that not just that people of African descent understood whom they were and whom we are, but those who are not of African descent to understand who we are. Because it is about sharing. It's not just something where it's just ours. History and culture and so forth is something that it's fluid. It can be exchanged. It can be shared. But when you
Mhm.
idea of dominance, if you will, that one culture is better than the other, it's like physics. For every action, there's an opposite and an equal reaction. So when we deal with issues of racism and white supremacy and things that are not positive, then there's
Mhm.
an equal and a just as powerful reaction. Hence,
Mhm.
the need for the civil rights movement, for the Black Power movement, for the push to have the idea of African thought and processes, instilled in schools. This is where we were back in the late 60s, early 70s, but here we are 50 plus years hence, and we're still having this conversation, and we don't really have to have that conversation. It's not that.
Exactly. You would think that this would have been put to bed.
Yes.
And it and in a very real sense, I think it was put to bed. Um, I remember growing up and being honest, didn't want to deal with Black History Month because it always started as slavery. Always started there. And then you tended to move forward. Um, but it's so much better now, I think, when you have children who are able to study not just the fact that Black people were enslaved, but so much more about African Americans and not only that, Africans and so many of the wonderful things that happen um, with Black people, for Black people, by Black people, even before there was a slave trade. During the slave trade, when you hear about the extraordinary stories of people, escaping and reaching their full potential, like Frederick Douglass. I mean, oh my gosh, what he accomplished, and to think that a mind like his and so many others were oppressed
Mhm.
unnecessarily, and what we potentially missed out on because someone was afraid of of Frederick Douglass reaching his or her full potential. And I think that's kind of what we still have going on right
Mm.
now. You've had a lot of people reaching their full potential. You've had, the first Black president of the United States not that long ago, and we very nearly had the first, African American female president of the United States, but we have had the first female vice president of the United States, and she happened to be Black.
Mhm.
Um, I believe fervently that you have a group of people, a large group of people who are still terribly afraid um, of not being in the limelight, of not being the creme de creme, so to
Wow.
speak, and having to share that with with everybody, with African Americans, with Native Americans, with Hispanic people, um, with women, with people with
Mhm.
disabilities, and it sounds like it feels like you're saying your will, they are saying their well-being, whether we're talking their financial well-being, their physical well-being, their mental well-being, is more important than all the rest of us. but
Right.
the, and that's the feeling that I get, that we're burning books because of what you said. The estimation that knowledge of self leads to greater self-awareness
Yes.
is part of the problem. And so in an effort to suppress that, we have to suppress the knowledge.
Oh, no doubt. And unfortunately, that's what's taking place. I mean, One of my favorite scholars is a man by the name of Dr. Yosef Menyakinen, and they're selling his books, some of his books and some of his recordings for like $30,000 or for five.
Wow. Wow.
And it is about keeping, the knowledge out of certain hands, if you will, of figuring out how to get money, from him, or someone like a John Henry Clark, or even a woman by the name of Drusilla Dunjee Houston, who wrote the wonderful Ethiopians of the Ancient Kushite Empire. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Unless you know some of these titles, because there aren't that many Black bookstores around now, you might not be able to see them. But I want to
Mm-hmm.
go back to what you were saying about Frederick Douglass and his, not only his actuality and the potential that he had, but even in terms of engaging the essence of the enslavement of African people. They did not enslave people who were slaves. They enslaved lawyers and
Mm-hmm.
doctors and
Mm-hmm.
nutritionists and
Mm-hmm.
engineers and individuals who were parts of communities. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the culture, the various African cultures were deconstructed and destabilized because of the Ma'afa, or the transatlantic slave trade, which produced a Frederick Douglass out of
Mm-hmm.
necessity. And think about, when you think about the story of Frederick Douglass, the fact that he was beat in a particular manner, but would not allow that to stop him from getting to the point where he was, and for him not to
Right.
forget from whence he came, and then to have a particular understanding of the United States where he actually excoriated the 4th of July. Because
Mm-hmm.
essentially, it was like the 4th of you lie, if you really read into what he was saying, because the
Mm-hmm.
very what the country was at that moment in time, it was not fair and equitable, right? It wasn't
Right. Right.
in the pursuit of happiness for everyone. So, yes,
Mm-hmm.
we moved forward, but you also talked about a level of understanding self, and how the burning of books would to an extent eradicate knowledge and opportunity for individuals to recognize who they are, from whence they've come, and understand, the collective contribution, if you will, of African people, and even potentially of individual families and so forth. What
Mm-hmm.
they just even in today's iteration of history, I'll just take Washington D.C. as an example. When you
Mm-hmm.
look at Washington, when you look at the White House, most people know that it was enslaved Africans that built the White House. So, yes, we had our hands on the building of this idea of a republic and a democracy, and that needs to be said, and said proudly. But I
Mm-hmm.
think what deeper is when you pull back or peel the onion a little bit deeper, is when you understand that the essence of a republic, the essence of a democracy, the idea of government in and of itself had already been practiced in Africa, in various aspects of Africa, for thousands of years. It is
Mm-hmm.
nothing, as the kids would say on the street, this ain't new to us. Okay.
Right. Right.
And to become even more specific, the idea of what the White House looks like, and I'm talking about the actual structure, the land upon which the White House sits upon,
Mm-hmm.
along with the actual White House, taking what is considered the Federal Triangle and recognizing that individuals and peoples in Africa had already used this type of governmental genius
Mm-hmm.
relationship to the heavens, because this is why we say in God we trust. It's not because somebody just came.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that's been around for quite some time. But this is the deeper conversation that ought to be had in today's society, particularly with the eradication of who people of African descent are, what our contribution to this country has been, and
Mm-hmm.
what our young folks need to understand more so now than ever. And you don't have to just be young. And you don't just have to be an older person of African descent in this country. This is about knowledge that everyone needs to have. And that leads me to an ancient idea that used to be written on top of all of the temples before you went into them.
Mm-hmm.
And that would say, man, woman, know yourself so that you will know God and all men that come before you.
All
Now,
right.
this is important because that type of instruction sets the foundation for a healthy mind. It's a
Mm-hmm.
for an individual to know who he or she happens to be, from whence they've come,
Mm-hmm.
who they are, what is their purpose, whose they are, and then how to engage in building a society based upon the foundation of God and what good culture represents. See, these are the ideas that come up out of the minds of an individual like a Imhotep or a Kajemi and many other people who we really don't get a chance to hear about. Or if you have a gentleman by the name of Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum, who
Mm-hmm.
wrote the book, The African Unconscious, which is an amazing book. It
Mm-hmm.
is Stolen Legacy, which is another book that was written by Dr. George D.M. James, on steroids. The,
Wow.
all families ought to have in their homes. These are
Mm-hmm.
books This is the type of knowledge that allows us to really not only understand who we are, but move beyond the madness that has been extended to us. Because while we live in this idea of a republic that's considered a democracy, but we
Right.
there are negative aspects of it. There's a manner in which we can, to a large extent, what I would like to take back that power. And when you
Mm,
understand who you are, where you come from, and the truth about these structures, if you will, you
mhm,
see differently. So let me give you an example speaking to.
mhm,
When any president has given a State of the Union address, the president stands at the front. Now, this is when he's addressing Congress.
mhm,
When he is in chambers, he stands in the front at the podium.
mhm,
To his right would be the vice president, and to the left would be the Speaker of the House, correct?
mhm, mhm,
Well, essentially, the foundation of that idea is etched in a picture of the goddess Sa, who the Greeks call Osiris, and you
mm,
have two goddesses behind him, the goddess
mm,
Greeks call Isis, and the goddess Nephthys. Now,
mm.
this is important because the foundation of government, with the idea of Asar sitting in his throne, or in his shrine, I should say, on his throne, sets the foundation for what the essence of this government is predicated upon. That is
Wow. So
that is.
they done went and got some idolatry stuff and created the whole country on it and didn't realize that's what they were doing.
I won't say that it's idolatry. It's the foundation of the cultural essence of people of Africa that sets the foundation for what this country is.
Mm,
And these are the ideas that we have to become comfortable with. And then we also have to unpack those things that we don't even know at this moment in time that either one had been taken, that's been subverted,
mm,
and has not been figured or found out at this moment in time. But it takes a deep level of study and understanding of self so that we can make sense of what's taking place. Now, with that being said, as we engage the essence of history in Black History Month, literally, what does that mean to this particular period in this moment in time with the
mhm.
negative language that we have been seeing within roughly 2 months, if you will?
Look, well, we can go back to 2016 if you want. If
I,
you
yeah,
want.
I, it's
Uh,
and you have a lot of people who are trying to follow suit and bring about what I would call it's bluster. There's no
mhm.
substance. It's bluster. If we're going to
Right,
deal with the politics, then let's deal with the politics. If we're going to
right.
deal with national engagement, then let's do that.
Mm,
If you're going to set a tariff, then set the tariff, but let it be right and proper so that the world can do what it's supposed to do as it pertains.
exactly.
The world has been set up now. All of the other comments about certain countries, certain countries not being up to par, or this, that, or the other, or disrespecting different peoples.
Mhm,
These different peoples, these different ethnicities had empires that
mm.
set the foundation for what this United States empire is predicated upon. And dare I say, even set the foundation for what this empire is, but it's not being utilized in its proper manner from a godly perspective. But that's a whole
Amen.
other conversation. So
Amen.
the knowledge of self as it pertains to Black history would allow individuals to see themselves within the context of not just their own history and their culture, but how we relate to other cultures as well. And then moving into what is considered a pluralistic society, how do we relate? How does it become the true essence of what do you call it, e pluribus unum, right? And out of many one. And where
Mm.
does the actual Latin phrase come from? And what does it really mean within a governmental perspective? And how does that relate to people of African descent? And were we the ones to actually create that idea?
Wow. And that's a question that I think we should know. You bring up all these ideas, all these deep thought exercises, I guess you could say, that I think we don't get to engage in. We get to, we get a lot of those critical thinking questions when we're taking, you know, American history, US history, even your civics classes focusing on your state history. But when you hear that there are people who look like you in Florida who are saying crazy stuff like, you know, Africans learn after the African slaves learned valuable lessons when they were
Oh,
enslaved, and
yeah, yeah,
they're pushing the narrative for, you know, changing the way history is taught so that it's whitewashed.
yeah,
It it sounds like you're dealing with people who don't have a sense, a fair sense, a true sense of self, of their own culture.
mm,
Like people who aren't of sound mind when it comes to their self-esteem about who they are, their, their mental health about who they are. It sounds crazy. In other words, just let's
yeah,
just let's just make it, plain.
yes,
It sounds absolutely crazy, and
yeah,
it sounds like the antithesis, of what you're saying, that that there's this correlation between knowledge gained about one's culture and the direct result it has on self-esteem. I, I
yes.
I don't understand how you can know the truth about who you are and where you come from, um, and then turn around and do something like that. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I'm just going to say this really quick. So when
Okay.
particular governor made that statement, I was extremely offended. Let me just say that, because that was
Mhm,
very insulting and it was
mhm.
very insensitive, right? So I mean, there's all these words, oh, how could you, and what manner of man are you, and all these things.
Right.
End of the day, that's not the first time that that's happened.
Right.
When you start looking at what has been said, over the years, and the negativity, the disrespect, the vitriol. I mean, the history is there, so that's backed up. So these folks, this particular person was going to continue to say what he wants to say. It's no
Right.
different in the historical aspect that people were pushing at a point in time, that the
Mhm.
pyramids were not built by people of African descent when the pyramids sit within the continent of Africa. And
Right, right.
it doesn't make any sense, but you understand what ends up happening. The fact that this is an individual who probably has a mental disorder to be able to say something like that, as if, enslaved people learned these valuable lessons. No, we were forced to do certain things, and Florida was one of the worst places for
Mhm.
people of African descent to be. Now, what's interesting is the pushback, and it ought to be pushback, but now you're going to tell me that you're going to burn a book, or you're going to change classes, you're going to change the way history is going to be written, or as you were saying, was going to be whitewashed. But
Mhm.
that's been done already. It is 2025, and now those particular genies are already out of the bottle. So you can't put them
Right.
back. Now, what's going to end up happening is 4 years is going to go by. This particular regime is going to be gone. That particular governor is going to be gone. The question becomes,
Uh-oh, we lost Mr. Mitchell again. Hopefully we will be able to reconnect with him soon. He looks like he's having technical difficulties on his end. I'm glad he's optimistic. Because I'll be perfectly honest. At the end of 4 years, I'm really not sure there's going to be in America as we know it. It seems to be crumbling faster than fast, quicker than quick. But I
yeah,
don't know if you were able to hear any of that. We lost you for a minute. But I'm glad you're optimistic about what it'll look like in 4 years. Because given what happened the last term, and the Lord had told me is, if you think he's upset now, wait until they try to get him out of here, and
yeah,
then for us to
no,
have January 6th.
it's
I
true,
I
true,
I don't
true.
think he plans to leave this time, and he seems to be putting, things in place to make it possible, and declaring himself king, floating
So
around this third term, all that kind of stuff. I really do think we're in a much more dangerous place than
I
people
would
realize.
I would say that the rhetoric is definitely heightened, from the first go round. But I will also say, for people of African descent, since we're dealing with Black History Month, focus on
Mhm.
us. Focus on what we don't know. Focus on what we need to do, and see,
Right.
it's that enlightenment and understanding that will give us what it is that we need to move forward. Remember, this is not the first time that this has happened. I mean, listen,
Amen.
Andrew Jackson is his uh
Predecessor.
the guiding light, quite frankly.
Mm,
And George Washington was a slaveholder. So at
yes.
the end of the day, we understand what this is. Fast forwarding to Barack Obama and then post Barack Obama, and folks are talking about post racism. No, there is no post racism until the
It
ignorance
never
is.
left. It never left. You're
So,
right.
in terms of that, it's about being as positive as possible, reaching to individuals who are open, because again, this isn't like it used to be. I mean, when you look at what happened when George Floyd was murdered, and the manner in which this country did erupt, if you will, that
Hmm.
gave pause for, okay, some things are changing, if you will. But I think when you look at this particular political cycle, if you will, for whatever reasons, the majority put this, including folks that look like me and you, put this clown in.
Yes.
And
Yes.
being said, still understanding what our foundational knowledge is and
Hmm.
understand how it's been incorporated and then how we ought to use it is what's most important. History is more important than, let's say, the liberal arts and sciences, because you
Mm,
have to understand the history of what's taken place in relation to the various arts and sciences, which there are seven, and
mm,
how it moved forward, right, wrong, or indifferent. History
mm.
is going to be the, again, as I said earlier, the barometer that allows us to know where we are as a culture and where the world is. And we've always been that barometer.
Mm.
Bottom
Amen.
the story. So in that particular instance, I have faith in us more than anything else. I got faith in God. And
Amen.
about again, man, woman, know thyself, so that you will know God and all men and women that come before you.
Amen. Amen. Oh, I know you got to get out of here. You got to get ready to go. I want to ask you one more question before you do. You said we should be positive, that we should continue. It sounds to me like remain engaged, but so many people of African descent in America have just basically become exhausted. They put so much into this last election, and the ones before, and basically they're just like, how could we get here? We have done this before. What How could we let this happen again? What do you say to those people who have kind of checked out, and for this new generation of kids who doesn't, who this is their first time voting, this, they're
Uh,
just now inheriting this mess, and they're trying to get the lay of the land.
what I would say, and this is going back to Black History Month, got to know your history.
Mhm,
Emmett
mhm,
Till was murdered in 1955 in Money, Mississippi.
mm,
And to a large extent, they say, and it is said that he is, that incident was the energy that pushed the civil rights movement forward.
mhm,
Now, to not know who Emmett Till is, to not know who Fannie Lou Hamer is, who is one of my heroines, because in the manner in which she was dealt with, and the woman said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." The
mm,
individuals, and I'm talking about our generations, those who are beginning to vote, those who are, my age and older, so we're talking 45 and older,
mhm,
understand what this history is. This isn't new, and
mm,
individuals have lost a lot more to get us to where we are right now. So we can't say, oh, I don't know what's going on, or I don't know how we're going to move forward. Our ancestors were enslaved,
right,
but
right.
our ancestors also built the Zimbabwe Wall. Our
Mm,
ancestors also built the Great Pyramids.
mm,
Our ancestors also set the foundation for speech and for
mm,
meteorology and all these other aspects. So there's nothing for us to worry about, because we've already done this. What we need
mm,
to remain steadfast, continue to have knowledge, to actually vote, if you will, and
mhm,
to engage society, not in the manner in which we are being socialized, but to
mhm.
get the information that we need so that we can create the reality.
Amen, amen. Well, I know you got to get ready to go. William wants to say something to you before you do, so we're gonna let William have his little say before we
No,
end this.
actually, I have one question, Mr. Mitchell. Can you come on tomorrow?
It's
He
gonna have
always tries to poach you when you are on. Always.
it's
No,
gonna have
because
to be
I'm
have to
sorry.
be
Go on.
early. It'll have to be very early, but we can talk offline. We can talk offline and see what we can put.
Okay. Well, we need
But
to talk. We need to talk. One other question. DEI. Uh,
yes,
when I hear a certain group of the population use that word in a negative light, it just, I'm boiling.
Yeah, he's
It's an
mad.
insult, and to me, your opinion about that, I think that is one of the biggest tricks that particular culture is playing on society. What's your take on that?
oh, I think it's horrible, and I think they're taking words and they're switching them around to make it
Mhm.
something very negative, and that's not how it's supposed to be. At the end of the day, I mean, I was about to say the clown came on
We get it. We
Yeah,
understand.
and I
came
agree.
on the news and was saying that one of the planes went down and it was because diversity, because of DEI, and I'm like, what are you crazy? But at the
Right.
you have to look at it for what it is, understand it for what it is, and continue to work in the space where we are. Now, my thing is, can you imagine if the truth, in terms of our cultural truth, were just to be shown in reference to where this man sits in the White House, in
Mhm.
terms of having him understand that he sits within an African idea? Now, what does that mean?
Wow.
Now, so we
Wow.
and I hear, William, when you're talking about, these words, truth can kill ignorance. Truth
Mhm.
eradicate ignorance. And regardless of what people say, if you know the truth, it's not going to matter what's being said. So when I
Mhm.
go to Washington, D.C., I walk in D.C. recognizing that this is an idea that my ancestors created. And I'm not talking about enslaved Africans. I'm talking about knowledge that was taken from three specific papyri that set the foundation for the idea of American government, the idea of a republic as we know it. And when you go into history, the oldest idea of a monarchy and the oldest idea of a republic comes out of the Sudan, upon which is now currently war ravaged, which now there is a North and a Southern Sudan. But that's a whole other conversation. But that's
Right.
that we're supposed to have, so that regardless of someone saying, well, DEI isn't something we're going to respect, or we're going to eradicate it, and we're not going to include it in these different stores that are no longer going to uphold it, because what? For 400 years, we weren't able to have a level of equanimity and equality, and now we want to kind of destable because the numbers are coming up. We have more people of African descent in this country becoming millionaires, billionaires, and listen, hip hop sells everything. I was there when
Mhm.
hip, right? I was there. And at
Right.
the end of the day, it's culture. And as
Right.
to be funny, and I'm a close on this. It is about Black History Month. Don't hate the player, hate the
Hate
game.
the game. It's time for you to go out and tell people how they can get your new book and how they can follow you on social media, and of course book you for events like the one you're about to be a speaker at
So
now.
I am about to put myself out there in a manner in which I have not done before. So I'm going to put out my email address, and I'm also going to put out the book. I think you have the cover of the book, which will be up on Amazon on Tuesday.
Awesome.
So the name of the book is Egyptian Origins of Washington, D.C.,
Mhm.
African Origin of America's Capital. And essentially, as a teaser, it shows the faces of two ancient Egyptian gods etched in the street layout of America's capital, and the foundation of the idea of democracy and a republic coming from the essence of African people, specifically coming up out of ancient Egypt. So
Wow.
that's a little bit about the book, but that will be on what is that? On Amazon
Amazon.
on Tuesday. And my email address is earlmitchell@yahoo.com. And that's EARLEMITCHELL@yahoo.com. I'm open for speaking engagements, open to do book clubs, and really share the type of information I've been putting together for like the last 25 to 30 years. So I appreciate the both of you for having me on. You have a
Always a
marvelous
pleasure.
I mean, you have a marvelous venue, and I just thank you for giving me the opportunity to share. And you do a great service for all of your listeners.
Awesome,
Wow.
awesome. Thank you so much for being with us. And thank you, Emma, for your comments. I'm sorry I didn't get to read them in for Mr. Mitchell. You have a blessed event. And we will see you hopefully Not as long of a wait as it was this time. Hopefully we'll be able to get you back sooner. Okay.
Yeah, like tomorrow.
Stop, William. He gotta go.
Got it. God bless. We'll talk soon.
Our pleasure.
All
Our
right.
pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Always a pleasure having Mr. Mitchell on, and
Yes, it is.
just a wealth of knowledge. Mr. Mitchell, have a wonderful day, sir. We really appreciate it. And ladies and gentlemen, hey, tune in tomorrow at 6 p.m. on the East Coast. That makes it 3 p.m. on the West, 5 Central for the Boomerang Radio Show. Our continuing information and education on Black history. Enjoy your Saturday, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great day. All right.